Hi. The sign of a great team is not a team that keeps all its commitments, because that's just as true of a team that takes very safe targets, right? So if a team hits 20 out of 20 targets in a row, then you've got to ask yourself whether the targets themselves might be too low. So you will break some commitments simply because of the unpredictable uncertainties that will always be there in life. The sign of a great team is one in which the members manage their agreements. What do we mean by that? It means if you know for sure you can't satisfy a request, then don't say yes, say no. Now, sometimes you might not be sure what the likelihood is of you being able to deliver on a promise. And you're afraid that if you say yes, then you'll overcommit yourself and set yourself up for failure. And if you say no, then you'll be seen as playing safe or not being collaborative. So in those cases, managing agreement also means that you can always say, let me check and I'll get back to you. And when you say you'll get back to someone, always give them a time by when you'll get back to them, and get back to them at exactly that time. If you just say, I'll get back, well, it creates uncertainty and they might feel that you don't consider their concern as important and are just procrastinating on it. And if someone says to you, I'll get back, well, then you might want to politely check if they can give you a time by when they'll get back to you. Managing your agreements means that if you realize you're not going to keep a commitment to someone, then you inform them as soon as you realize that. And you ask if you can renegotiate a new agreement. You may even want to do something else to make up, to show that they and your word are both important to you. If you ask someone to do something for you and you realize that you don't need them to do it anymore, inform them as soon as you realize that to save the effort. This is what you expect to see in a high-performing team. You may not be able to keep all your commitments, but with some practice, you can manage almost all of your agreements. So what do you do if someone in your team or even outside your team breaks a commitment to you? What does it mean to hold someone accountable? Lots of people use that term. Very few people can really pin down what they mean by it. Holding someone accountable doesn't mean firing them or shouting them or giving them a low rating or making them feel bad or scared. Now, you may decide to do any or all of those things, and that's a separate conversation. But we're going to talk you through a process of handling conversations with people who have broken their commitments to you. And this is what we mean by the phrase holding people accountable. The first step is to check if you actually have a broken commitment. There might be a misunderstanding. So when a coachee misses a coaching call, I don't send him or her a mail saying you missed your coaching call. I say, according to my calendar, we had a coaching call booked at this time, but I didn't hear from you. So I just wanted to check if you missed the coaching call or if I made a mistake with my scheduling. Now, once you establish that a commitment was broken, the second step is to understand why the commitment was broken. And there may be a very good reason. There was an emergency medical situation. They had to rush a family member to the hospital, for example. So first listen with 100% empathy to what happened. And be careful, even if the reason seems to be fairly indefensible from your viewpoint, not to cut them off. You may be afraid that you're giving them the impression that you're willing to accept excuses and justification, but listening and even understanding someone's point of view doesn't mean that you agree with them. Hear them out completely. They're much more likely to respect you and listen to you if they feel you heard them out. The next step is to ask, why did they not inform you when they realized that they were going to break their commitment to you? Because remember, informing someone that you're going to break a commitment to them as soon as you realize it is one of the key features of a high-performing team. If they have a really good answer for why the commitment was broken and why it was impossible for them to communicate it earlier, or if they communicated as soon as they could, then let it go. You heard them out patiently, sounds like they did everything they could, just move on, figure out what the next steps are, and make a new agreement. However, if the answers are not reasonable, point out that a commitment was broken and share the consequences that the broken agreement had and how you feel about their actions in this regard. You may even ask them to make up for it in some ways appropriate. Then have a deeper discussion to identify the root causes that led to the breakdown. This may be a conversation with a lot of open questions and exploring and perhaps even some coaching thrown in. And once you feel you've found solutions to the underlying breakdown, then reach a new agreement that both of you feel confident will happen. If you do not feel confident that they're going to keep their agreements, or if there is a track record that they keep breaking their agreements to you without taking due care, then you may need to terminate their employment. Keeping someone in your team whose word you can't rely on means that you can't be sure that you can keep your own promises to others. And if your own integrity and reputation is important to you, then you may need to take this hard call. But this is obviously not something you want to do without really trying to work through it. First of all, you need to be keeping your own commitments. If you're not managing your own agreements, then you are going to spread that culture of the team. Secondly, you need to be making complete requests. And we have a separate video on that subject. If you're not making complete requests, then you might be setting yourself up for broken commitments. Then you need to have empathetic and honest conversation, even if they're uncomfortable, to hold people accountable if they're not managing their agreements. And finally, if after all this, and unreasonable investment of your time in coaching them, they are still not reliable, then termination of the professional relationship is a legitimate and maybe even advisable option. It may have an emotionally draining short-term impact, but in the long term, it's far more energizing and impactful working with people who you can trust. This is, of course, the step of last resort. But if you follow all the other steps as well, then you probably won't need to do this. You would have created a culture of accountability.